Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by and spending part of your day with me. So today I have another canning video for you. Fall is going to be here officially in just a few days. Sadly, summer is leaving us. That is my favorite time of year, but I do enjoy fall as well. So as I was thinking about what videos I'd like to do for you guys, one of the things that I have found that you guys love is baked beans. So I wanted to do a canning video of baked beans with a little bit of a fall twist. So today I'm going to show you how to make and safely can up apple cider baked beans. Yes, we're going to be canning up some beans with some delicious apple cider in the background. Now, as I was trying to put together this recipe so that we could do it safely and make safe changes, you guys know I'm a safety girl, but we can be kind of limited on the things that we can up. I like to use safe and tested canning recipes and try to give them a little bit of a Carol twist, and that's what we are going to be doing today. Now I'm going to be using the Complete Guide to Home Canning, and if you all do not have this book, I recommend that you get it. It is a nice, especially if you're a new canner, it's a great one to start with because it has all the basics in it. It is written by the United States Department of Agriculture. It does include a lot of the recipes that are on the National Center of Home Food Preservation. So if you need a copy of this, I will leave a link in the description box below so that you can easily click the link and get yourself a copy. Like I said, it's great to have on hand. So we're going to use their method for canning up baked beans with some safe changes. So they have a few recipes in here for baked beans. They have the traditional Boston baked beans, and then they have beans dry with tomato or molasses sauce, and they walk you through the steps to make those. So as I was trying to come up with a safe way to make apple cider baked beans, what we're going to do is we are going to combine the ingredients that they are using for both tomato or molasses sauce, and I'm going to add a few other ingredients to come up with the apple cider baked beans. Before we get into what we're going to need, what ingredients we're going to be using, I do want to point out that the baked bean recipes in here have different processing times than just canning up beans. I'm not really sure why that is, but I'm going to use the canning times that they are recommending in the guidelines in this book for baked beans. The only logical explanation that I can come up with why the processing times would be different is because baked beans, they're recommending that you fill your jar 3/4 full of beans and then top it off with sauce to the 1-inch headspace. When you're canning up just beans, the guideline states to fill your jars to 1 inch with beans and your cooking liquid. So, and the directions are a little bit different. When you just process beans, they like for you to cook them for 30 minutes prior to canning them. That is not part of the instructions for canning up baked beans. So for those of you who are familiar with canning, as we go through the guidelines for this, you're going to go, what? That seems a little bit different than how I can up beans or the guideline for canning up beans, and that is true. They are different, and like I said, the only logical explanation I can come up with is because you're using fewer beans when you can up baked beans. I go even further. I like to fill my jars approximately 2/3 full, as opposed to 3/4 full of beans, because they can be dry at the end. Because beans love to absorb sauce. As you're processing them and as they sit on your shelf, they continue to absorb sauce. So I like my beans a little bit saucier. So I use even fewer beans than what they recommend in the guideline for canning up baked beans. So just a little note on that, just be aware of that. But I am going to follow the guidelines for canning up baked beans, not for canning beans, if that makes sense. The other thing I want to point out here is this is going to be small batch canning. I know many of you request small batch canning recipes, so that's kind of why I went this route. Plus, it's just me, so I don't need large amounts on my shelf. But you can can these in quarts or pints. So the recipe we're going to be using today is going to make approximately 4 to 5 pint jars, or roughly 2 quart jars. That is the minimum you need for proper processing for pressure canning. Beans are a low acid food, they must be pressure canned. And there are minimums in pressure canning. There are no minimums for water bath or steam canning, but for pressure canning there are. So this recipe is going to be the minimum that you would need to safely process baked beans. If you want to do it in larger amounts, obviously increase the amounts of what we're using for sauce and the amount of beans we're using. So for our apple cider baked beans, we need 1 pound of dried beans. You can use navy beans, you can use cannellini beans, you can use kidney beans, you can use pinto beans, whatever dried beans that you like. Navy beans are traditional in baked beans. I am going to be using cannellini beans, which are white kidney beans, and we are just going to, their guideline states to use the quick soak method. So what I did is I washed and sorted them, I put them in a pot, I added 3 cups of water for every cup of beans. So for 1 pound of beans, that's approximately 3 cups of beans. So I added 9 cups of water, brought them to a boil, covered them, and let them sit for an hour to rehydrate. So you need the 1 pound of dried beans soaked. We're going to use 2 cups of apple cider, 1 cup of water. The water that I'm using is going to be the cooking liquid from partially cooking our beans. We need 3/4 of a cup of both maple syrup and molasses, a 1/2 cup of ketchup, 1 tablespoon of dried onion, a teaspoon of dried mustard, 2 teaspoons of seasoned salt, 1 teaspoon of allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. A note on the spices. You can safely add any dried spice you like. So if you wanted these to be really appley, you could use apple pie spice. You could add a dash of cinnamon, would be delicious here. You can increase or decrease any of the dried ingredients that appeal to you. We can safely change up dried spices. So whatever you'd like to add or take away, it's totally fine to do that in this recipe. I found this to be a really nice flavor profile. The other thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly before we get started here is I am going to be adding about a 3/4 to a 1-inch slice or piece of thick sliced bacon. Their instructions do allow us to add a 3/4 inch cube of pork, ham, or bacon to each jar if desired. So I am going to do that. Bacon, ham, both of those things are controversial when using in canning, but they do allow us to use it for baked beans. So I am going to be adding that to my jars. So just a note on that. Don't send me a message telling me I'm not supposed to use bacon. It is part of the guideline outline for baked beans. So I'm going to bring you in close, so we're going to get started. Okay guys, I let my beans soak for an hour, just like I told you, and then I drained them from the original liquid, and I have added more fresh water on top of my beans that have been rehydrated. So now I've got my heat on high, and we're going to bring our beans up to a boil in fresh water. While that's happening, we are going to get started on our sauce. All right, we want 1.5 cups of apple cider, a 1/2 cup of ketchup, a 1/4 cup of molasses, a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. I want 1 tablespoon of dried onion flakes. And for my other seasonings, I have 2 teaspoons of seasoned salt, 1 teaspoon of ground dried mustard, a 1/2 teaspoon of allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and 1/8 teaspoon of cloves. All of this is to your taste, so you can adjust accordingly. Another spice that I think would be really nice in the background here, if you want to try it, is to add a tiny bit of cinnamon. Would be really great here, but that's entirely up to you. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I'm going to whisk that together. And we're going to bring this up to a boil as well as our beans. Once our beans have reached a boil, we are going to use about a cup of the liquid that we're boiling our beans in. We're going to add that to our sauce here, and then we are all set for canning. Okay guys, I've brought my beans up to a boil like the instruction said. My sauce is also at a boil. So now I'm going to take about a cup or so of our cooking liquid and I'm going to add that to our sauce. And then we are all set for canning. Okay guys, I have 3 inches of simmering water in the bottom of my pressure canner. Like I showed you, my beans have come to a boil, my sauce is all set. We are going to start with 2 hot jars. The modern canning guidelines state that we do not need to pre-sterilize jars or lids as long as we're canning for 10 minutes or more, and we are. The lids I'm using today are ball lids, so I do not need to preheat them. As a matter of fact, Ball states not to do that. So I've just washed my lids, set them aside. I've kept my jars hot in my canner. So we are ready to fill our jars. So we're going to start by filling our jars about 2/3 full with our hot beans. The instructions from the National Center for Home Food Preservation say that you can fill your jars up to 3/4 full of beans. I prefer about 2/3 because I like for my beans to have some sauce, and they tend to absorb a lot of sauce during the canning process. So just so you can kind of see, I'm just a little over half. So about 2/3 full with our beans. And to that, we are going to add our sauce to 1-inch headspace. Sorry, I lied. Next, we're going to put in our small piece of bacon. I'm using about a 1-inch slice of thick sliced bacon. We're going to put that in first, and then we are going to add our sauce. Okay, once you get to your 1-inch headspace, you're going to use a debubbling tool, plastic butter knife, or a chopstick to release any air bubbles in your jar. If your headspace changes, you can top it off with more sauce. We're going to use a paper towel dipped in white vinegar to clean our rims. We're going to center our lids. And then add our bands to fingertip tight. And in the canner they go. Okay guys, I've got my jars in my canner. I'm going to take about a tablespoon or so left over of my white vinegar and put it in my canning water. That just prevents minerals in our water from collecting on the outside of our jars and making them look cloudy. So that's why I like to do that. We are going to go ahead and put our lid on our canner. For the All-American canner, you're going to line up the notch on your pot with the arrow on the lid. Get it about as even as you can, and then we're going to tighten our thumb screws opposites, 2 at a time. And we're going to crank our heat up to high. We are going to watch for steam to start coming out of our vent, and we're going to allow that to happen for 10 minutes. That is called venting, and it is part of the canning process. You must allow your canner to vent for 10 minutes. And after our 10 minutes are up, then we can place our weight onto the vents. Okay guys, we've been venting for 10 minutes, meaning we've seen steam, come out of our vent for 10 minutes. So now it's time to add our weight. I'm going to be processing at 10 psi. Make sure you know your altitude because that could change. That could be different. You may have to make some adjustments to your psi. So make sure you know your altitude. I'm below 1,000 feet, so I'm going to be processing at 10 psi. So I'm going to find the 10 on my weight, and then I'm going to add that to my vent. Once my weight starts jiggling, I can start my processing time. For the All-American canner, you want your weight to rock 1 to 3 times a minute, meaning it'll rock and then stop. It'll rock or jiggle and then stop. For the Presto canner, I believe it's supposed to rock continuously, so make sure you follow the manufacturer's instructions for the type of canner that you have and that you are using. So once my weight starts jiggling, I'm going to start my processing time. I'm going to process for 65 minutes because I'm processing in pints. If you're processing in quarts, you're going to process for 75 minutes. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is, as far as your heat goes, Once your weight starts jiggling, like I said, you're going to start your processing time, but we want to maintain a heat that will allow it to just maintain the proper jiggling of our weight. So you don't want your heat to be up too high throughout the canning process. So once it starts jiggling, you want to slowly reduce your heat to just maintain the proper rocking of your weight. If your heat is too high, it will jiggle too much, and we don't want that. So just make sure you know what canner you have, how often it's supposed to jiggle or how it's supposed to jiggle, and then slowly reduce your heat just to maintain that. Okay, for those of you who are new to canning, I just wanted to bring you in and give you an example of heat that is too high. So here how it's constantly jiggling and it's jiggling really vigorously. We don't want that to happen throughout the canning process. So I need to reduce my heat so that it's properly rocking 1 to 3 times a minute, meaning it will rock and then stop, and then rock and then stop, and that should happen 1 to 3 times a minute for the All-American canner. Make sure you reduce your heat slowly. Quick temperature fluctuations in our canner can cause siphoning, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to slowly reduce my heat to get it to jiggle appropriately, and then when we're finished processing, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are all done. I processed my jars for 65 minutes for pints. If you're processing for quarts, it's going to be 75. Once my processing time was up, I turned off my heat, allowed my canner to cool to 0 pressure, waited a few minutes, took the lid off, and then my jars have been sitting in my canner about an additional 10 minutes. You want to let them cool slowly. That helps prevent siphoning, but here you go. Delicious fall twist on baked beans. You guys seem to be crazy about baked beans. Those are some of my most watched videos, are videos on baked beans, which is why I decided to do a fall twist. But you can see how much the beans have expanded just during the canning process. As they continue to cool and sit on your shelf, they will absorb even more of that sauce. So that's why I like to use more sauce and fewer beans. So there you have it. Fall baked beans. Delicious, going to be so yummy for the upcoming fall season. If you have any comments or questions about the recipe, be sure to leave them for me in the comment section below. You will find links in the description box below my video for some of the equipment that I used, and to the original recipe, which is also on the National Center of Home Food Preservation. That is the recipe source that I used and modified a little bit to safely can up a fall version of baked beans. Thanks for coming along with me today, guys. I will see you next time.